The city lay beneath him like a restless ocean of glass and steel, its streets pulsing with headlights and hurried footsteps from the 48th floor. Alexander Preston could almost convince himself that everything was normal, that the great machine of Manhattan still churned faithfully, indifferent to his private disaster. But the illusion shattered the moment his eyes dropped to the financial reports on his desk. Columns of red numbers glared back at him, a cruel reminder that his empire, Pinnacle Enterprises, was rotting from within. $300 million, gone as if swallowed whole by some invisible tide dot at 53. Alexander still looked every bit the picture of a titan of industry. His Italian silk tie was knotted with mathematical precision, his silver hair sculpted to perfection, his bespoke suit crisp and unyielding. To an outsider, he might seem untouchable, calm, deliberate, in control, but inside, fear gnawed at him like a disease. His temples throbbed, his chest tightened. For 22 years, he had built this empire brick by brick, line of code by line of code, deal by painstaking deal. And now, with 3 days until the quarterly report, all of it threatened to collapse. 300 million, he whispered, his breath fogging the glass as he leaned toward the window. His reflection stared back at him, hollow-eyed, accusing. His phone buzzed again on the desk, the vibration cutting through the silence like an insect trapped in a jar. Another call from the board, another demand for answers he did not have. He let it ring. Words felt useless now. He had already fired his CFO. The forensic accountants had combed through every ledger, every transaction, with no explanation. Investors were circling, and by Monday morning, if he could not show them a miracle, they would pull out, leaving him with nothing but dust and memories. His gaze drifted to the single photograph on his desk. It was the only personal item in an otherwise sterile office. In the faded picture, a younger Alexander stood beside his father outside their tiny Ohio hardware store. His father's arm was draped around his shoulders, pride in his eyes. Though the store itself was modest, a crooked sign, a worn awning, shelves half-stocked. That store had been Alexander's first classroom, where he had learned the rhythm of numbers, the value of trust, the weight of responsibility. He traced the edge of the photo with his thumb, and for a brief moment, he was no longer the CEO of a crumbling empire, but a boy with dirt under his fingernails and hope in his chest. "I won't let it end like this," he muttered to the silent office, making a promise to the ghost of his father. Down below, the revolving glass doors of Pinnacle Enterprises opened and closed in steady rhythm. As the night staff arrived, among them, the cleaning crews filed in quietly, pushing carts laden with supplies, and outside, waiting by the curb, the company's old night bus idled with a tired groan of its engine. The driver, Mr. Carter, leaned against the wheel, shoulders hunched beneath a threadbare jacket. He had worked the night shift for nearly 3 decades, ferrying employees home long after the subway stopped. Few executives knew his name. Even fewer noticed when he nodded respectfully at them in the lobby. But the cleaning staff noticed, and they nodded back. It was an unspoken acknowledgement between the invisible people who kept the building breathing. Carter caught sight of Gloria Washington and her daughter as they hurried past the bus. With a cart of supplies, he raised a hand in a small wave, his tired eyes softening. The girl, hardly taller than the mop she carried, gave him a sullen nod before following her mother inside. Carter sighed, shifting in his seat. He had seen children come and go in this city, swallowed by it or forgotten. He had no idea that this little one would soon change everything. Up above, Alexander adjusted his tie again and squared his shoulders. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, announcing that the financial team was waiting. He inhaled sharply, forcing steel into his spine. The board could smell weakness, and he had none to spare. He left the photograph where it stood, a silent guardian of his promise, and strode toward the door. But the glass walls of his empire felt thinner tonight, as if something or someone was waiting just outside his field of vision, ready to pierce the illusion of control he had spent his life building. The building smelled faintly of lemon polish and coffee gone stale, the scent of late nights and early mornings. Gloria Washington pushed her cleaning cart down the gleaming marble hallway, her tired shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Her uniform was pressed, but her shoulders sagged with the weight of double shifts. At her side, barely keeping pace with the squeaky wheels, walked her daughter Lily, a little figure dwarfed by the cart, her pigtails bouncing with each step. She held the handle of a feather duster like it was a baton. her small face set with determination far older than her years. "Stay close to me, Lily," Gloria whispered, glancing nervously at the silver plaques on the doors around them. "Executive offices." The words seemed to shine brighter than the light fixtures overhead. "If anyone sees you here, I could lose this job." Lily nodded solemnly, her eyes scanning everything with a kind of restless curiosity. She didn't look like a child dragged into a grown-up world. She looked like she was studying it, memorizing every angle of the glass walls, every hum of the air conditioning vents, every flicker of red numbers on a screen glimpsed through an open door. They were supposed to remain invisible. That was the rule. Cleaning crews entered when the important people had left, working silently so that in the morning, the empire would shine again as though no one had ever toiled within it. But this morning, Alexander Preston was still there. He had been pacing when they arrived, his voice low and hard as he spoke into a phone. Lily had seen him in his glass-walled office, a tall man with silver hair and a suit that looked like it belonged on a mannequin in a window, not on someone who lived in the same world as her. His face had frightened her, not because he was angry, but because he looked so sad. She'd seen that look before in the hospital waiting room when her mother worried about bills, or in the eyes of neighbors who just lost their jobs. Red numbers on a screen always made people look that way. As Gloria disappeared into a restroom to scrub sinks and mop tiles, Lily was left in the hallway with her duster and trash bag. She worked quickly, lifting small waste baskets, wiping smudges from door handles, her little hands moving with practiced skill. She had been doing this for months, sneaking in alongside her mother. She knew how to be quiet, how to vanish into the shadows when footsteps echoed. But tonight was different. A door down the corridor had been left ajar, golden light spilled out, along with the low electronic hum of a laptop left on. Lily paused, her pulse quickening. She shouldn't look. Mama would scold her, but curiosity tugged at her. And before she could stop herself, she nudged the door open just a little wider. Inside, the big man's office glowed in the darkness, the city skyline stretched out behind him through a wall of glass. But it was the computer screen on his desk that caught her eye. So many numbers, tumbling down in neat rows, black and red, some flashing. She stepped inside slowly, almost reverently, as if approaching an altar. Her fingers itched. She loved numbers. They made sense in a way people didn't. She climbed into the leather chair that seemed to swallow her whole. Her legs dangled, but her eyes locked on the screen. The columns were wrong. She knew it instantly. They repeated, multiplying where they should have divided, skipping over days as though the sun hadn't risen. She frowned, biting her lip, her small brow furrowing. It was like a puzzle, and puzzles were her secret joy. Lily's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She hesitated. Mama always said never touch what didn't belong to her. But this wasn't just anything. These were numbers, and numbers were different. If numbers were wrong, they cried out to be fixed. Downstairs, the night bus rumbled as Mr. Carter leaned against the wheel, watching the lobby doors through the glass. He glimpsed the cleaners still at work, shadows moving across marble floors. He thought briefly of his own daughter, grown now, who used to sit beside him on those long nights, sketching homework problems on scraps of paper. He tapped the steering wheel absently, unaware that just 48 floors above him, another child sat before a screen that could determine the fate of an empire. Back in the office, Lily pressed a key. The code opened like a maze of words and symbols. She didn't understand all of it, but she didn't need to. Patterns leapt at her. The program counted some things twice when they crossed midnight. Other times, it misplaced decimal points like crumbs on a table. She leaned closer, whispering under her breath as she worked. No, not like that. Divide here. Check the date. Fix the line. Her fingers moved faster, guided not by training, but by instinct. The silence of the room seemed to deepen. The only sound the faint clicking of keys under her tiny hands. Somewhere down the hall, Gloria's mop bucket rattled. Somewhere outside, car horns blared. But here, in this office, a 7-year-old child was quietly rewriting the code that had brought a corporation to its knees. And then the footsteps came, heavy, decisive, echoing closer. Alexander Preston was returning. The office door stood half open. Lily froze, her small hands still poised above the keyboard. The glow of corrected lines of code casting blue shadows across her face. Her heart pounded. She had fixed puzzles before, but never a puzzle worth $300 million. When Alexander pushed open the door and saw her sitting there, The world inside his empire shifted forever. Alexander's footsteps hit the marble floor like hammer strikes, the echo carrying down the corridor as he approached his office. His shoulders were squared, his jaw tight, his mind racing with boardroom strategy and the gnawing terror of failure. He was already rehearsing answers for questions he couldn't solve, already building defenses for a war that would erupt at dawn. But when he pushed open the door to his office, the war he found was nothing he had prepared for. There, in his chair, the chair he'd sat in when negotiating billion-dollar contracts, when signing deals that shaped industries, was the little girl he'd seen earlier in the hallway. Lily, her feet dangled far above the ground, her small frame swallowed in leather, her face illuminated by the cold glow of the monitor. She froze as he entered, eyes wide like a startled deer, hands hovering above the keyboard where lines of code blinked and shifted. "What do you think you're doing?" Alexander's voice came out sharper than he intended, slicing through the still air. Lily jumped down so quickly she nearly tripped over her own shoes. "I'm sorry," she stammered, backing away from the desk. "I didn't mean I was just—" Alexander's eyes flicked to the screen. What he saw made him falter. The code that his interim CFO Patricia had sent him just hours earlier, the trading algorithm at the center of their $300 million nightmare, was open. Only now it wasn't the same. Lines were altered. Notes were scribbled into the margins in clumsy but legible typing. His pulse kicked. Someone had tampered with the system. His mind spun. Corporate espionage. Had someone planted this girl as a distraction? Who was she working for? He shut the door with a sharp click, the sound making Lily flinch. "Who sent you in here?" His voice lowered, quieter now, but far more dangerous. "Was it one of my competitors? Did someone tell you to touch this computer?" Tears welled in the child's eyes. She shook her head furiously. "Nobody sent me. You don't just walk into a CEO's office and break into his system." His eyes locked on hers, searching for deception. But all he saw was fear, and beneath it, something stranger, conviction. "I saw the numbers were wrong," Lily whispered. Alexander's heart skipped. "What did you just say?" Her little hands twisted together in front of her. She stepped closer to the desk, her voice trembling but firming with each word. "The numbers on your program, they were wrong. They were counting things twice when the days changed, and the decimal points went the wrong way sometimes. It wasn't checking the dates right." Alexander blinked. He had sat through hours of analysts trying to explain the mess. He had heard words like recursive error and time zone drift. But this child, this janitor's daughter, was summing up the same nightmare in language so simple even he could see it. Impossible. He moved to the desk, eyes darting over the code. His throat went dry. The adjustments weren't random keystrokes. They targeted exactly the problem Patricia had mentioned. He scrolled, scanning through the corrections, and the impossible became undeniable. The child had not broken anything. She had fixed it. "Where did you learn this?" His voice dropped to a whisper, stunned. Lily shifted on her feet, her gaze falling to the floor. "At the library. They have computers and books. I like numbers. They make sense." Alexander sank into the chair, the world tilting around him. His empire, his millions, his career rescued, perhaps, by the small hands of a 7-year-old girl who should have been doing homework, not debugging a multinational corporation's algorithm. The door burst open again, startling them both. Gloria Washington stood in the frame, her uniform sleeves damp, her face pale with panic. "Lily, there you are." She rushed in, grabbing her daughter's shoulder, her eyes darting from the CEO to the glowing screen. "Sir, I am so sorry. My daughter knows better. She wasn't supposed to, please. If you need to punish someone, punish me. Don't blame her." Alexander looked from Gloria's trembling figure to Lily's solemn, frightened eyes, then back to the lines of corrected code still glowing on the screen. For the first time in weeks, a crack of hope split through the suffocating wall of despair inside him. "Punish her." His voice was rough, almost incredulous. "Mrs. Washington, your daughter may have just saved my company." The words hung in the air like thunder, shaking them all. Gloria's eyes widened, confusion battling with disbelief. Lily bit her lip, trying to understand why the man who looked so sad hours ago now stared at her like she was holding a miracle in her hands. Outside, far below, the city continued its endless hum, oblivious that, in a single office high above, the future of an empire had just shifted into the hands of a child no one was meant to notice. The building was nearly empty when Alexander called Patricia Winters back to his office. Midnight pressed against the glass walls like a dark ocean, and the city lights burned far below. Unaware that $300 million teetered on the edge of being lost or recovered, Patricia arrived in a hurry, her blazer rumpled, a tablet tucked under her arm. She started to speak, but stopped cold when she saw the small girl standing quietly beside Gloria, clutching the hem of her mother's sleeve. "Who's this?" Patricia asked, confusion etched across her face. Alexander didn't answer right away. He was still staring at the glowing screen on his desk, where lines of code scrolled with improbable elegance. He finally turned toward his CFO, his voice steady but strange, as though he himself didn't believe what he was about to say. "This is the person who may have just fixed our problem." Patricia blinked, then glanced at Gloria as if expecting a joke. Gloria pulled Lily closer, as if shielding her from the weight of disbelief. "It's true," she whispered. "I found her here. She says she saw something wrong with the numbers." Patricia stepped closer to the desk, scanning the modified code. At first, her brow furrowed in irritation, the kind she reserved for interns who thought they knew more than they did. But then her expression shifted, her eyes widened. She leaned closer, scrolling faster, muttering under her breath, "Oh my God," Patricia finally whispered. She's corrected the recursive loop, the double count on time zone transitions, and here," she jabbed a finger toward the screen, "this decimal subroutine. I spent 3 hours trying to isolate this exact error last night." Alexander's mouth was dry. He watched his most senior financial officer, a woman who had spent decades in the field, slowly sit down as though her knees could no longer hold her weight. Patricia rubbed her temples, then looked up at Alexander, her voice trembling. "These changes aren't guesses. They're precise, elegant. Sir, this is brilliant." The room was silent except for the hum of the computer. Alexander turned toward Lily, who stood with her small chin lifted, though her eyes betrayed uncertainty. "Where did you learn this?" Patricia asked her, her tone gentler now, almost reverent. Lily shrugged, her voice quiet but sure. "Numbers. Tell me things. They don't lie. I saw what was wrong. It wasn't hard. Not hard." The word struck Alexander like a blow. His team of experts had labored for weeks, burning through resources and confidence. And this child had looked at the numbers once and seen what no one else could. "We need to test this right now," Alexander said, snapping into action. "Run the simulations with her corrections." Patricia nodded, fingers flying across the keyboard. Data surged across the screen, algorithms recalculating, figures cascading. Alexander stood over her shoulder, his heart pounding like a drum. Gloria clutched Lily's hand, whispering prayers under her breath. The numbers began to shift. The red that had bled across the screen for weeks faded line by line. Negative balances flipped into black. Ghost losses reappeared, reconciled by $1.m. Nearly $200 million had been recovered on paper. By 2 a.m., the figure had climbed to $287 million. Alexander leaned against the desk, gripping its edge so hard his knuckles whitened. His breath came in shallow bursts. He wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream, but he did none of those things. Instead, he looked at Lily, who was fighting to keep her eyes open, exhaustion finally overtaking her. She had curled against her mother's side, her small head resting on Gloria's shoulder, her lips moving faintly as if reciting numbers in her dreams. "Patricia," Alexander said hoarsely, "triple check everything. We cannot afford a mistake." "We already did," she whispered back, "her fix is whole, sir. If this continues, we'll reconcile everything before the market opens." The enormity of it crashed over him. His empire, which hours ago had been crumbling, had been pulled back from the abyss by a girl who should have been sound asleep in her bed. But another wave followed, darker, colder. If this became public, the board would crucify him, a CEO saved, not by his expertise, not by his team, but by a janitor's daughter. To investors, it would be a story of humiliation. To rivals, it would be blood in the water. And to men like Thomas Blackwell, chairman of the board, it would be the perfect reason to force him out. Gloria's voice broke his thoughts. "Mr. Preston, please, don't punish her. She didn't mean." Alexander cut her off gently. "Mrs. Washington, your daughter may have just saved 5,000 jobs, and maybe more than that." He paused, his gaze fixed on the sleeping child. "But no one can know. Patricia's head snapped up. Sir, no one outside this room can. No, it was her. Not yet. Not the board, not the press. They'll tear her apart. He turned back to Gloria, his voice softening. She's 7 years old. Do you understand what they'd do to her if the world knew she was the one who caught this? They'd make her a commodity, a brand, a weapon. Gloria's eyes filled with tears. She nodded slowly, clutching her daughter tighter. Alexander looked again at the screen where the recovered millions flickered back into existence. For the first time in weeks, hope burned in his chest, but beneath it, a heavier truth coiled in his gut. Saving the company was only the beginning. Protecting Lily and keeping the vultures at bay would demand more courage than he'd ever shown in any boardroom. And as the night deepened around them, Alexander realized that the fight of his life had only just begun. Dawn spilled pale light across the glass towers of Manhattan, gilding the city in false calm. For Alexander Preston, the night had been sleepless, a battlefield of numbers, silence, and revelation. He stood at the window of his penthouse, tie loosened, shirt rumpled, a man who had seen the abyss and somehow pulled back from its edge. The recovered millions glowed on the reports his team finalized at 4 a.m. Pinnacle Enterprises was safe, at least on paper, but what haunted him wasn't the survival of the company. It was the small figure who had collapsed into sleep in his office chair, clutching her mother's hand after doing what no army of experts could. He saw her face now as he stared into the morning sky. Solemn, focused, almost defiant. Lily Washington, 7 years old, invisible to the world until last night. She had saved his empire, and no one could ever know. The phone vibrated on the coffee table. Patricia's voice buzzed through, weary but triumphant. Final reconciliation is complete, sir. 300 million accounted for. The reports will show profit. We're in the clear. Alexander let out a slow breath, and the adjustments, tested, verified, airtight. But I haven't told the board how we found them. I'm assuming that's what you want. Yes, Alexander replied firmly. Not a word. He ended the call and immediately dialed another number. Gloria's. She answered on the first ring, her voice wary. Mrs. Washington, I'd like you and Lily to meet me for lunch. There's something I need to discuss with both of you. Silence stretched. Then, sir, if this is about what happened, it is. And I give you my word, no one will blame her. But this isn't punishment. It's an opportunity. By noon, he was waiting at a small Italian restaurant in Midtown, a place discreet enough to shield them from curious eyes. He had reserved a private room, asked for a special children's menu to be printed, even arranged for the waitstaff to bring extra bread to the table. When Gloria and Lily arrived, he was struck by the care they had taken. Gloria wore her best dress, faded but pressed, and Lily's hair was neatly tied with ribbons that matched her plaid jumper. Their effort moved him in a way he hadn't expected. He rose as they entered. Thank you for coming. Gloria hesitated at the doorway. Mr. Preston, before we begin, I want to apologize again. Alexander raised a hand. No apologies. Please, sit. They did, and for a moment the room was filled only with the clink of glasses being set down. Lily eyed the breadbasket hungrily, but didn't move until Alexander gently nudged it toward her. I need to tell you something, he began, his gaze shifting between them. The error Lily corrected wasn't minor. It was $300 million. Without her, my company would be bankrupt today. Gloria's lips parted. 300 million? Her voice cracked on the word. Yes, Alexander said quietly, and I don't intend to let that go unrecognized. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, a scholarship trust for Lily, covering her education through graduate school, another set offering Gloria a position at Pinnacle, full salary, benefits, stability, a third, a lease agreement for a 2-bedroom apartment in a building he owned near Central Park. Gloria's hands trembled as she flipped through the papers. This is too much. It's not enough, Alexander countered, his voice softened, almost breaking. You don't understand. Your daughter didn't just save numbers on a screen. She saved 5,000 jobs, families, futures. She saved me. This isn't charity. This is a debt, and it's one I intend to repay. Lily looked up from tearing her bread into perfect halves. Does this mean I can go to school every day? And Marcus can have his own bed? Gloria covered her daughter's hand, tears welling in her eyes. She looked at Alexander, as if searching for the catch. The hidden angle. Why are you doing this? Really? Alexander hesitated, the truth clawing its way out of him. Because I was once like her, a boy with a gift and no way to use it. Someone gave me a chance, and it changed my life. If I don't pass that forward, then everything I've built means nothing. For the first time, Gloria's shoulders relaxed. You sound like my late husband, she said softly. He always said the same thing when you climb. You reach. Down, Lily leaned across the table, her eyes serious beyond her years. But Mr. Preston, if I helped you, doesn't that mean I work for you now? Alexander smiled, something breaking open in his chest. No, Lily, it means I'll work for you. For a brief, fragile moment, the weight of boardrooms and stock markets disappeared. They were three people at a table, bound not by contracts or numbers, but by something far stronger. But outside that private room, the storm was already gathering. Unbeknownst to Alexander, a junior executive at Pinnacle had already whispered to a journalist. By morning, headlines would scream of a janitor's daughter who saved a corporation, and the board hungry, restless, and divided would seize upon the story like wolves scenting blood. The breadbasket emptied, the pasta bowls cleared. But as Alexander walked the Washingtons out into the chill air, he felt the shadow of what was coming. Gratitude was not enough to shield them. What he had done today was plant a flag, one that would draw enemies from every direction. And for the first time in decades, Alexander Preston realized his war was no longer for profit, but for people. The Sunday edition of the Wall Street Journal hit the streets before dawn. By the time Alexander arrived at headquarters, the headlines were already plastered across newsstands and glowing on every smartphone screen. Child genius saves tech giant janitor's daughter fixes. $3 flaw. Alexander's car had barely pulled up to the curb when he saw the swarm reporters, photographers, and camera crews crowding the entrance like vultures, microphones extended like weapons. Flashes exploded as he stepped out, their questions hurled in a chaotic storm. Mr. Preston, is it true a 7-year-old corrected Pinnacle's algorithm? Will the company exploit this child as part of a publicity campaign? Who is she? Where does she live? Can we speak with her mother? Alexander's security detail muscled him through the throng, but his heart pounded for an entirely different reason. If the press knew this much, how long before they found Lily herself? Upstairs, the boardroom was already filled. The directors sat in a tight semicircle, faces grim. Copies of the newspaper spread before them like evidence at a trial. Thomas Blackwell, the chairman, leaned back in his seat, fingers steepled, his expression unreadable. Alexander, he said coolly, I believe you have some explaining to do. Alexander's jaw tightened. This leak was unauthorized. The child, her name is Lily Washington. Thomas cut in smoothly, and according to the press, she's the reason Pinnacle is solvent today. Do you deny it? Alexander glanced around the table. Some faces were skeptical, others hostile, a few merely curious. He could see the battle lines forming. What I deny, he said, his voice hard, is the notion that a 7-year-old is responsible for the survival of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. The algorithm was corrected. That is all anyone outside this room needs to know. But Thomas smiled thinly. The public disagrees. Investors disagree. Our stock is already climbing on the news. Do you understand what kind of story this is, Alexander? Rags to riches. A cleaning woman's daughter saves a tech empire. The press is eating it alive. It's not a story, Alexander snapped. It's a child's life. She deserves privacy. A low murmur rippled across the board. Some nodded in agreement, but others whispered about opportunity, about brand potential, about the marketing boon. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment, Thomas said. This girl is a tremendous asset. Handled correctly, she could redefine Pinnacle's image overnight. Imagine the headlines, innovation for the people, genius from the streets, a corporation that nurtures hidden brilliance. It's PR gold. The words fell like acid in Alexander's ears. He slammed a fist against the table. She is not an asset. She is an 8-year-old child who happened to see what others missed. And if any of you think I will let her be paraded as Pinnacle's mascot, you've lost your damn minds. The board fell into tense silence. Then you leave us no choice, Thomas said finally. A vote of no confidence. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Alexander felt the ground shift beneath him, the empire he had built tilting once again toward collapse. Across the city, Gloria tried to push through the crowd gathered outside her apartment building. Reporters jostled to photograph Lily as she clung to her mother's hand, frightened but composed. Questions were flung at them like stones. Lily, how did you fix the code? Do you want to be a CEO when you grow up? Do you think you're smarter than Pinnacle's own engineers? Gloria shoved past them, her voice breaking. Leave her alone. She's a child. Inside the apartment, she locked the door and drew the curtains tight. Lily sank onto the couch, hugging her knees, while Marcus peeked out from behind a chair. Sensing danger, but not understanding it, Gloria's phone rang Alexander's number. She answered with trembling fingers. They're outside, she whispered. They followed us home. They were shouting at my baby. I know, Alexander said, his voice grim. I'll send security immediately. But Gloria, the board is moving against me. They want to use her. Gloria's breath caught. Use her. She's 7. She still sleeps with her stuffed rabbit. How can they even think? Because to them, she's a headline, not a human being. Alexander said quietly, I need you to trust me. Whatever happens at the vote tomorrow, I will protect her, even if it costs me everything. Gloria closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. She asked me today why red numbers make people sad. I told her someday she'd understand. I didn't think someday would be now. That night, Alexander worked alone in his office. The city a blur of light beyond the glass, the vote of no. Confidence loomed over him like an executioner's blade. He knew Thomas would rally at least half the board. He knew the media frenzy was feeding their greed. And yet, beneath the fear, a strange calm settled over him. For the first time in decades, his fight was not for quarterly profits or market dominance. It was for something infinitely more valuable. The photo of his father on the desk seemed to watch him, a silent reminder of the boy who had once stood in front of a hardware store, with nothing but hope, and for the first time since he was that boy, Alexander Preston knew exactly what he had to do. He wouldn't just fight for Pinnacle. He would fight for Lily's right to remain a child. He would fight for the unseen, the overlooked, the invisible brilliance buried in forgotten corners of the world. If Thomas Blackwell wanted a war, then Alexander was ready, and in the quiet of the night, he whispered to the empty office, they think she's my weakness. They're about to learn she's my strength. The boardroom smelled of polished wood and fear. Heavy curtains blocked the morning sun, leaving the space lit only by recessed spotlights that gleamed off the long mahogany table. 20 men and women sat in a crescent, their eyes fixed on the man at the head, Alexander Preston. Some looked weary, some coldly calculating, others restless with anticipation. Every chair was occupied. Every vote counted. Thomas Blackwell adjusted his cufflinks, his voice calm, almost casual. As he opened the session, colleagues, the matter before us is simple. Pinnacle Enterprises faces reputational and strategic risk. Our CEO has entangled the company in a situation involving a child, a janitor's daughter no less, whose alleged contribution has now become international news. We must decide whether to proceed under his leadership, or whether new direction is necessary. A ripple moved across the table. Words like child, janitor, news hissed through the air. To them, Lily was already a commodity, a headline package for stock price leverage. Alexander's jaw tightened as he listened, his hands folded neatly before him. But beneath the table, his knuckles whitened. Alexander, Thomas said smoothly, before we vote, you may offer your defense. But know this, our investors are watching. The world is watching, and they see this little girl as a corporate miracle. You could be a hero if you'd play along. Alexander rose slowly, buttoning his jacket, his silver hair catching the light. His voice, when it came, was low, resonant, and carried an unexpected edge. I've been CEO of Pinnacle Enterprises for 22 years. In that time, we've weathered recessions, scandals, lawsuits, and failures. And I've always believed the board's duty is to protect not only our shareholders, but our principles. Today, those principles are on trial. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, lingering on each director. Yes, a child saw what our experts could not. Her name is Lily Washington. She is not a mascot. She is not a PR stunt. She is not, as some of you have whispered, an asset. She is a 7-year-old girl whose instinct for numbers is extraordinary. And the first thing she did with that gift was try to ease someone's sadness. Mine. The silence was thick, suffocating. Then murmurs began, impatient, skeptical. Thomas leaned forward, touching, But sentiment is not strategy. We're not here to honor children. We're here to secure this company's future. What guarantee do we have that protecting her privacy serves Pinnacle's interests? Alexander's eyes hardened. None. Just as there was no guarantee when I started this company in a garage with a second-hand computer and $20,000 of student debt. Innovation has never been about guarantees. It's about vision, and my vision is this. Pinnacle will not exploit a child to polish our image. Instead, we will invest in thousands like her, hidden talents, unseen brilliance. With a nod to Patricia, the lights dimmed, a screen lowered. A documentary began to play and see potential. The film opened not with Lily's face, but with statistics. Millions of gifted children worldwide living in poverty, their talents buried under circumstance. Then came stories. Jaden, 9, a chess prodigy from the Bronx. Maria, 10, who spoke 6 languages. Darnell, 11, who engineered water filters from scrap metal. Their laughter, their struggles, their voices filled the boardroom and interwoven. Was Lily's story presented not as miracle, but as proof that brilliance could bloom in the most overlooked corners of society? When the film ended, the room was silent. The kind of silence that came after a sermon. Patricia dabbed her eyes. Jensen, once firmly in Thomas's camp, shifted uncomfortably, visibly shaken. Alexander stood again. Gentlemen and ladies, this is Pinnacle's future. Not chasing quarterly profits, but cultivating human potential. Not parading a child for headlines, but building a foundation that ensures there will be thousands more like her, given the tools to change the world. He let the words hang before delivering the blow, and it will be called the Carter Foundation. Named not after me or the company, but after a man you've all passed 100 times without noticing our night bus driver. For 30 years, he's ferried employees safely home while the city slept. Unseen, unpraised, but vital, just like the families we ignore until a crisis makes them visible. Gasps rippled around the table. Even Thomas blinked, caught off guard. You want Pinnacle to stand for something. Alexander finished, his voice iron. Then let it stand for those we've overlooked. That is the legacy I'll fight for. Vote how you will. The room erupted. In whispers, arguments, shifting loyalties. Finally, Thomas called for order. We vote. He said tightly, one by one. Hands rose. The tension was unbearable. 6 against Alexander. 7-4. Then Patricia raised hers 4. 8. Another followed. 9. The tide was turning. Finally, Thomas sighed, leaning back in his chair. Very well. The board supports the initiative. No vote of no confidence today. His tone was clipped, but there was something else in his eyes, a grudging respect. Hours later, Alexander left headquarters. The crowd still surged outside, but this time the questions were different. Mr. Preston, what is the Carter Foundation? Is it true Pinnacle is funding education for underprivileged children? He didn't answer. He simply stepped into his car, across the city, in a modest apartment now nearly packed with moving boxes. Lily waited at the window. When she saw his car pull up, she ran to the door, Marcus tumbling after her. Gloria stood behind them, her eyes shining with both pride and worry. Lily threw her arms around Alexander's waist the moment he entered. Did you keep your job? She asked breathlessly. Alexander crouched, looking into her solemn eyes. Yes, but more importantly, we made sure you don't have to be anyone's mascot. You just get to be yourself. Her small hand slipped into his. Good, because Marcus and I already decided you're part of our family now. Families don't need mascots. Gloria laughed through her tears. Alexander swallowed hard, overwhelmed. In that moment, it no longer mattered that he was CEO, or that his empire had been pulled back from ruin. What mattered was the warmth of those tiny hands, the quiet strength of the woman beside him, and the sense that for the first time in decades, he wasn't building a company, he was building a home. The world would remember Alexander Preston as the CEO who saved Pinnacle, but in his heart, he knew the truth. It was Lily Washington who had saved him, and that truth, no headline could ever capture.